Rosebud. Ugh. Rosebud. Rosebud. In the movie, Citizen Kane, Charles Foster Kane, on his deathbed, is recollecting his past. He's amassed a great fortune, European art collection, tons of things, a variety of memories and everything. But what he's searching for is Rosebud, that one thing from his childhood, from his past, that he seems to long for and yearn for. And Rosebud doesn't turn out to be a girl or some cryptic memory or something. It turns out to be his sled from childhood, that time of innocence when he was young and things seemed wonderful and filled with potential and delight. I have a Rosebud thing as well, a sled. It's a soap on the rope that says Rosebud on it, reminiscent of the movie. But I look at this thing and I think of how it evokes the movie and that holy grail, that kind of item that, if we just had it, our life would be complete, that 57 Chevy or whatever it was. For many in the comic book world, it would be Action #1, which recently sold for $2.2 million. My name is Jim Vacca. I'm a reader first, and then a collector of comic books. I've read and collected comic books for 50 plus years, and I'd love to have an Action #1. This is not the actual copy, but a reprint, but a faithful object nonetheless of Superman's origin and first appearance. And for many, this would be the Rosebud, the holy grail of their collection. But that's only one level of value within comics collecting or collecting in general. There's so many different values to be had when one is archiving the past. I've become my own personal archaeologist, as it was, digging into my past and my own identity, at the same time mining the riches of history and the culture around me as I grew up, but in ways that are quite curious, in ways by looking at these ephemeral witnesses of a time gone by, which seem to capture our culture and maybe our personal past in very unique ways. For instance, here I can show you this little item here. It's a pencil case, no longer used, I'm sure, with the remnants of someone's elementary school career, a little ruler and some spent crayons and so on. But inside of it, it says Sylvia. When I pick up this object, I wonder who Sylvia is. I wonder where Sylvia is now. I wonder who gave her this or how she bought this. I wonder about its history that seems now to be trumped, as it were, by a world filled with stuff. But this little thing tells me a personal history and a cultural history as well. So I'm taken up with collecting and this world of things for what they tell me about my past and what they tell us about our collective past. Some of them are charged with innocence and delight. When I look at something like the Ferris wheel of Mickey Mouse there with his friends going round and round, this little wind-up toy from days gone by. Some are less innocent reminders of our prejudicial past, as this palm-held puzzle, which is called a dexterity puzzle. And here it is. It's a little graphic of an atomic bomb, and you're supposed to get the little BB shots there into Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What I love about these objects is that they also transport us back to that time without any filters. They carry the prejudice as well as the innocence and delight of the time that they represent, as does a comic book like this EC Comic Crime Suspense story, a rather horrific cover. And yet, when I look at this, I wonder who purchased this, who bought this, who read this, what child was, who handed it down through history. That's a personal value in collecting. And you don't need a large pocketbook to be able to amass those things which will speak to your past at some time, or maybe speak to your past right now. That in a sense, the act of remembering is to remember, put the parts back together. A collection is putting the parts of yourself back together. And for me, those parts were contained in comic books, what I've remembered about comic books. Now, today, it's very fashionable and wise from an investment standpoint to have a comic slab. That is, it's encapsulated in plastic. It's graded by a third-party grader who gives it a designation between 1 and 10, 10 being the highest. But for me, although this is a wonderful object, it's rather pretty much a dead thing because it can't be read, it can't be shared in its entirety. It is an object to be stared at rather than read. And again, my collecting standpoint first came from the delight there was in reading them. The delight in reading comics. When I was a kid growing up in the 1950s in Jersey City, along my paper route, there were 2 used bookstores, a place where people kind of threw out their junk after maybe an uncle had died, and they'd gather and put out all their stuff there. And I can remember going to Carl's bookstore on Central Avenue in the 3 for a dime pile and picking up these 4-color wonders and being exposed to comic books and finding them out on my own. And I still remember the smell of the place. You know, it smelled like old paper. It's wonderful to think about how smells can take us back to a specific time and a specific place. And though they're not the most expensive things in my collection, they're some of the more prized objects that I have, even though this one is almost beat to shreds. This copy of Strange Tales 101, the first appearance of the Silver Age Human Torch. And I look at this and I'm 10 years old again. I remember where I was when I got this comic. At Carl's, I believe I got this one, and I read it until it literally fell apart. And this one, purchased off the stands, Amazing Spider-Man number 10. And its value is not now for me that it's a number 10. Its value is in its... I smell that intoxicating paper, and that brings me to a sensibility about collecting. And awareness. Carl's was my first classroom. It was the place where I learned how to read. So collecting for me has been not just a hobby, but a lifelong pursuit in terms of gathering those objects around me that have personal, cultural, and sometimes political importance. And these are things that are more than just objects for me. They represent a time gone by in our collective history. And reading. I come to them first and foremost as a reader. And I want to know these things. I want these things here that in some way begin to define me. Or that might be a bit too much, but at least describe me. I have some words that I have placed down that kind of summarize, and because I've smithed them out here a little bit, I want to say them exactly. So we'll peruse around some of these objects, and please think about these things as you think about gathering your own rosebuds, as it were, because they don't have to be items of great expense. Look for those things that are emblematic of the place in which you lived, the time in which you lived. And once you start seeing them, you will see them flower all over. I became my own archaeologist. My story is somehow deeply entwined in cultural narrative. I wish to curate and combine personal and historical memory. These artifacts reflect the world at a particular time and place. In some ways, they recapture the past better than the objects that they imitate. They have the intensity of primary source material. They stand as ephemeral witness to the distortion of memory coupled with charming innocence and sometimes cruel prejudice. They give me license to scrutinize my own memory, hence their power and their value. In a sense, I am collecting myself. I am remembering, putting back together those external fragmented parts of my own identity. So collecting is not only about the financial gain, but for the emotional breadth of awareness that will come once you start to gather in these things that somehow tell about you and tell about the time you lived in. Thank you very much.